Have you ever had a time where you were scared, you were perplexed, you didn't know what was coming, what was going to happen next? That was Daniel's emotional state when he receives this vision in chapter 8. He didn't know what was going on. In captivity, under the second king already, and under Belshazzar's reign. He's getting up in age. I don't know about you, but I've had times like, at 70 now, I wonder, where is all this going to end up? Where am I going to end up living? And I'm concerned about the future. Well, Daniel even more so because he got a partial glimpse of what was in store for Israel. And it was not a pretty picture. And the last time we read in chapter 7, at the very last verse, in verse 28, it says, "This is the end of the matter." Daniel wrote, "I was deeply troubled by my thoughts, and my face turned pale, but I kept the matter to myself." So Daniel is troubled, he's pale, and he's silent. He's thinking about all these things. Because what God had showed him in chapter 7 was a totally different picture than what he had seen than what we had seen in chapter 2. In chapter 2, we saw this vision that Nebuchadnezzar had of the succeeding kingdoms, the Babylonians, the Medo-Persians, the Greek, and Roman, eventually the Roman Empire. We saw them as being something powerful, something noble, something of great achievement and dominance. And then we saw in chapter 7, while Daniel was troubled because God showed to Daniel, you know what? I don't see kingdoms the way people do. I see them as being beastly. And he described Babylon as a winged lion. He described the Medo-Persian as a bear, the Greeks as a leopard, and the Romans as a monster, and eventually with the final one is the Antichrist. So at the end of chapter 7, Daniel is, he's troubled, he's pale, and he's keeping these things to himself. Have you ever been troubled in your heart? You're just, man, I'm telling you, I got some things that trouble me. And I think about them all the time. And I want some resolution, and I want some kind of future. I wish I knew what was going to happen. And so I just kind of pray about it and put it in God's hands. Well, that's what Daniel did. But God did an interesting thing for Daniel. He's going to expand on what he did in chapter 7 in chapter 8. He's going to expand on the vision he already got with another vision. Now, let me kind of give you a big picture here. Daniel has 4 visions. His first vision, he was 67 years old under Belshazzar, okay? The next one in chapter 8, as we're going to see now, he is 69 years old. He's 1 year younger than me. So, and then he's going to get another vision when he's 81 years old, and then the final one when he's 86 years old under Darius and then under Cyrus. But these 2 that he had in chapter 7 and 8 was under Belshazzar. Now, if you remember, chapters 2 to 7 is written in Aramaic, and chapter 8 to the close of the book in chapter 12, it's written in Hebrew. Because now the focus is on the nation of Israel. Daniel already pretty much explained what kind of dominion and what kind of power the Gentiles are going to have, okay, and how it's going to come to its final resolution. So now Daniel's concerned, well, okay, what about us? What about the Jewish people? What about the nation of Israel? And so God gives him a partial vision in chapter 8. Now he's going to expand it on in chapter 7. Now he's going to expand it on 8 and really expand it in chapter 9, 10, and 11. Okay, so let me read to you, and then I'm going to explain some things here as to what's going on. Okay, so if you want to turn in your Bibles to Daniel chapter 8, and I'm going to begin to read. In the third reign of King, I'm going to put my glasses on. Okay. In the third year of King Belshazzar's reign, I, Daniel, had a vision after the one that had already appeared to me. That's the one in chapter 7. In my vision, now he's going to describe 3 different places where he was. In my vision, I saw myself in the citadel of Susa, the province of Elam. In the vision, I was beside the Ulai. I'm hoping I was pronouncing this right, canal. I looked up and, okay, let me just, this is in the area of Saudi Arabia and just south of where Babylon is in modern day Iraq, okay? And it's on the opposite of Egypt and close to Iran. Okay, so this is where he sees himself, even though he's in Babylon. Okay, I looked up, and there before me was a ram with 2 horns. Okay, so you see that originally the Babylons were, by Nebuchadnezzar, was described as gold. God described them as a winged lion. Then you see the Medo-Persia as silver, and God describes them as pair. Now they're described as a ram with 2 horns. And then we're going to see what is bronze, that is the Greek, as a leopard, and we're going to see what's going to happen in the future here. You know what's interesting about these glasses? I can read the print, but I can't see what I'm looking at. My eyes are all messed up. Okay. Okay. I looked up, and there before me was a ram with 2 horns. Okay, picture this. Use your imagination. There's this ram with 2 horns standing beside the canal, and the horns were long. One of the horns was longer than the other, but grew up later. I watched the ram as he charged towards the west and the north and the south, and no animal could stand against him, and none could rescue from his power. He did as he pleased and became great. Now, obviously, he's not talking about an animal. He's talking about these kingdoms. So he's basically saying that what I saw was the Medo-Persians. They just went and conquered and did whatever they wanted. Okay. And as I was thinking about this, suddenly a goat, another animal, with a prominent horn between his eyes came from the west, crossing the whole earth without touching the ground. Let me put my glasses back on. He came towards the 2-horned ram I had seen standing beside the canal and charged at him in great rage. I saw him attack the ram furiously, striking the ram and shattering his 2 horns. The ram was powerless to stand against him. The goat knocked him to the ground and trampled on him, and none could rescue the ram from his power. The goat became very great, but at the height of his power, his large horn was broken off, and in its place 4 prominent horns grew up towards the 4 winds of heaven. And I'm going to explain that in a minute, because Daniel's having this dream, and then he's going to get its interpretation. So chapter 8 is kind of divided, not a dream, a vision. He's given this vision, and then he's going to get the interpretation. Okay, now, out of them came another horn, which started small, but grew in power to the south and to the east towards the beautiful land. It grew until it reached the host of the heavens, and it drew some of the starry host down to the earth and trampled on them. It set itself up to be great as the prince of the host. It took away the daily sacrifice from him, and the place of his sanctuary brought low. So obviously, we're going from the ram, which is the Medo-Persians. The Medo was a shorter horn. The Persians was the longer horns because they were a little stronger than the Medos. The he-goat is Alexander the Great. And he's the one that conquered Media Persia with great swiftness. Okay, we all know he died at the age of 33. Okay, he had killed his friend. You know, his father was murdered. That's how he came into power at a young age. And by the age of 33, he had conquered everything here and died in a kind of a drunken stupor. Okay, and he left, and that's why you have four horns, what was left of his empire, to four different generals. And they took certain control over certain areas. Okay. Now, let me put my glasses back on. Now at the end here, we're not talking about the four generals anymore. We're now talking about the Antichrist. So I do a little line here because there's the gap between the Roman Empire and the revived Roman Empire. Now, Daniel doesn't know this. He doesn't have a clue yet. He's kind of seeing this as being successive without a gap. Okay, he's going to come to see that there is a gap in the next chapter. And that's where we get the 70 weeks of 69 and the week of the tribulation. And I'm going to diagram that for you on the board. Okay, so he's talking now about the Antichrist. It set itself up to be as great as the prince of the hosts. It took away the daily sacrifice from him, and the place of his sanctuary was brought low. Because of rebellion, the host of the saints and the daily sacrifice were given over to it. It prospered in everything that it did, and truth was thrown to the ground. That sound familiar concerning today? Okay. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one, and said to him, how long will it take for the vision to be fulfilled? And the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, the rebellion and desolation, and the surrender of the sanctuary and the host that will be trampled underfoot. And he said to me, and pay attention to this, it will take 2,300 evenings and morning, and then the sanctuary will be reconcentrated. And I'm going to explain that to you in chapter 9 when we get there. Now, while I, Daniel, was watching the vision and trying to understand it, there before me stood one who looked like a man. And I heard a man's voice from the Uli calling, Gabriel, who is an angel, tell this man the meaning of the vision. As he came near the place where I was standing, I was terrified and fell prostrate. Okay, so Daniel goes from being troubled and pale to silent to now falling down on the ground after the vision that he's got. So he's going from bad to worse. Okay, so he's wanting to understand it. And he's at the point where he couldn't even speak anymore. And so while he was speaking to me, I was in a deep sleep with my face to the ground, and he touched me and raised me to my feet, and he said, I'm going to tell you what will happen later in the time of wrath, because the vision concerns the appointed time of the end. Now, the time of wrath is when God says, okay, enough's enough. And he's going to come and during the tribulation and then continue and set up his millennial kingdom for 1,000 years. And he says to this, he says, I'm going to tell you what will happen later in the time of the wrath, because the vision concerns the appointed time of the end. The two-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media Persia, and that's what I showed you. Media Persia, Media being the shorter, and then Persia, this is the second kingdom after Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, no, that ain't going to work. And the large horn between his eyes is the first king. The four horns that replace the one that was broken off represents four kingdoms that will emerge from the nation but will not have the same power. Those are the four generals. In the later part of their reign, when rebels have become completely wicked, that tells you what the time is going to be like at the end, before as the Antichrist comes on the scene. You see a lot of rebellion on TV now and on the news. Wait till then. When the church is raptured out and the restrainer is removed, it's going to be utter chaos. In the later part of the reign, notice how he describes people. When rebels have become completely wicked, a stern-faced king, a master of intrigue, will arise. Pay attention to the characteristic of the Antichrist. Okay? Completely wicked, stern-faced, master of intrigue will arise. He will become strong, but not by his own power. He will cause astounding devastation, will succeed in whatever he does. So he's empowered by Satan himself. He will destroy the mighty men and the holy people. He will cause deceit to prosper as if it isn't happening now. Okay? And he will consider himself superior. Talk about a narcissist. This is the ultimate height of narcissism. When they feel secure, he will destroy many and take his stand against the prince or princess, yet he will be destroyed, but not by human power. The visions of the evening and morning that has been given to you is true, but seal up the vision, for it concerns the distant future. I, Daniel, was exhausted and lay ill for several days. Then I got up and went about the king's business. I was appalled by the vision. It was beyond understanding. He could not possibly understand it all. But he got an idea what was going to happen to Israel and what the end time was going to look like. A lot of people are going to die. A lot of people are going to be martyred. And Satan is going to rise on the scene. And that's going to conclude what's called the revived Roman Empire. So, here's the message. See a lot of people in power and kingdoms and dynasties and, and monarchs. They may put a lot of emphasis on their dominion and conquering and CEOs and people that try to do a lot. I've seen a lot of them fall on their face, much like Nebuchadnezzar, until he came to his senses. The greatest thing a person can do is to humble himself before God and say, God, you're sovereign. Whatever happens in my life is because you have a purpose and you're fulfilling that. That is if you're living in the Spirit. If you're not, then, you kind of, God allows things to happen in his will that he doesn't want to have happen, okay? There's different types of wills of God. One is his decreed will, which is going to happen whether you like it or not. In other words, Jesus is coming back. In other words, his desired will, what he would have for you in your life and how he would have you to live, and all things give thanks. That's his desire for you, not to be overly critical or complaining. Okay, and then there's his permissive will, what he allows to have happen. Okay, so in his sovereignty, he has also given man a human responsibility to demonstrate in faith his word in their life. So as I shared in the beginning of this message, I have concerns too, what's going to happen. There isn't any security in this world and in the things of this world. Your security is in the Lord, much like Daniel's was. Okay? We get trouble the same way Daniel did. He was a human being just like the rest of us. And there's times we need to come to God and just say, hey, yeah, I understand this is not going to turn out very well, but I know in the end it will. And I want to trust you with my future. I want to trust you with my life. I want to trust you that you're sovereign over everything I do, and you got a purpose and a plan for me because you love me. And that's the message that Daniel got. That's the message that we should get. In chapter 9, and I'm going to diagram it here, we're going to get the prophetic timeline that shows how and the dates all this is transpired. Without chapter 9, you cannot understand the Bible properly, and you can definitely not understand the book of Revelation. Okay, a lot of teachers and pastors and their interpretive process violate these principles that God gives us in biblical interpretation, or in other words, hermeneutic, and subsequently, and they end up all over the place. I'm not addressing a lot of them, but they're called amillennials, post-tribulationists, They got different categories and camps that they get into, and they try to explain Scripture in a way that is not consistent with the Word of God. We're going to get into that next time. God bless you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.